Why shouldn't you buy a house or an apartment in China? That's going to be the topic of today's video. Now, I can remember close to 14 years ago now, in May 2007, I visited China for the first time, and I was just a tourist then. I wasn't living in China at the time, unlike a few years later. And I spent some time in Shenzhen, and in fact in some of the developing areas of Shenzhen like Bao'an, because I was actually visiting a friend there. And we actually went, me and my friend, to a property company. Just like in the UK or Arab countries, of course, you can see like the apartment and the price, blah, blah, blah. And what's interesting is at that time, you could buy an apartment in some areas of Shenzhen for the equivalent of £30,000, which is about, or was about $60,000, because the pound was 2 to 1 in 2007. And at that time, $60,000 or £30,000 was only about 470 or something thousand RMB, because the pound was 16 to 1. So this was a long time ago. And I remember saying to my friend that we both agreed, and we said this could be a great investment. This could absolutely skyrocket, especially in a place like Shenzhen, because Chinese people don't have as much access, at least in the mainland, to the kind of investments we do in the West. A lot of Chinese people, property is de facto the best investment, right? Because the local stock market's much more unstable compared to many in the world. Obviously, cash doesn't pay much. Yeah, you can buy gold and just leave it in your house, but it's not very convenient. So we thought that, especially because Shenzhen's a growth engine, could be a great investment. And what's interesting is both me and my friends are not particularly property bulls. As anyone who's watched this channel knows, I'm not particularly that bullish on property. I'm not a huge fan of property investment unless somebody's a professional in the area. So it shows that if we thought it was a good idea to buy property at the time, then well, it must have been, at least on paper, quite a good investment, or at least a good chance of being a good investment. And that has subsequently happened. If you would have bought that property for £30,000 or $60,000, you could have even made 10 times on your money in some areas of Shenzhen, especially if you factor in the currency appreciation against the pound. However, if you want to buy in 2021, I think it's a bad idea for a number of reasons. Number one, the price has gone up so much that a lot of the rises have already happened. Number two, the property yields are crazy now. Now, I have a client and a friend who lives in China, and he's living in a luxury apartment, and he pays $4,000 a month for that particular apartment. And you know what he told me? If he was to buy that apartment on mortgage, he's actually gone to his bank just out of curiosity and said, well, if I buy this house, how much would it cost on mortgage? And it would cost $8,000, yes, $8,000 on mortgage. So buying on mortgage is double the rent, because some parts of China, the rental yields are as low as 1% or below, sometimes 2%, but very low rental yields. So that means if you buy an apartment in China or a house with these crazy rental yields, even if the price goes up by a reasonable amount, you might still be losing in the scheme of things, right? Because especially if you're comparing renting to buying, right? If buying is double, then you need the property value to go up a lot, even to break even. Now, I know that's not the case for a someone who's doing buy to let, but still we have to remember that. And linked to that, number three, is that if you're buying an asset, it's always better to focus, or at least something like property, it's always better to focus on rental yields than capital appreciation, because with capital appreciation, you're just hoping that the person who comes after you will pay more than you did. That might happen, but it's speculation. So with China, the rental yields are incredibly low, just like Taiwan, just like many other places in Asia for that matter. So even if you succeed, you buy in China and it's a great investment, it's still a speculation compared to buying in a country where, for example, property prices are lower, but the yields are higher. Because if you're buying in a country where you can make 10%, and there are some countries like that, where you can make 10% doing Airbnb, that's not speculation, right? You know that based on the average market condition, you can make maybe 8 to 10% on rental yields. If the property goes up in value, it goes up. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? Whereas if you're buying when the rental yields are as low as 1% or below, and certainly usually below 2%, you're speculating that the price rises will continue. And that's pure speculation. And number 4, we have to remember as well, and I saw this for myself when I lived in China, that most, or many at least, wealthy Chinese people started to diversify into international real estate, and for that matter, international stocks, because they saw the prices were going so high in China. So even though that started to go down a bit now, we have to remember that even local people started to see that the prices are too high, and even if they're buying internally in China, they're being more picky about buying in 3rd or 4th tier cities, or maybe construction in the countryside. I can remember a big story when I was living in China about all the Shanghainese people who were buying in a 3rd tier city. I forgot the name now, but 1 or 2 hours away from Shanghai. So the major cities in China, the property values look too high, the rental yields too low. And in addition to that, you have some aspects about China that are a risk, which were a risk in 2007 and are still a risk in 2021. So for example, getting money out isn't easy. Finding a buyer for so-called second-hand homes isn't always easy because Chinese people prefer new homes. It's not like the UK where we like to visit a house, view a house where somebody's already lived in that house. In China, actually selling a property is very difficult compared to the UK. I know several people living in China who have actually made, on paper, a profit from the property, but they can't find a buyer for the price they want. So that's another risk, as is the political system and other things. So when you take that all together, in 2007, it was a good risk-adjusted investment to buy Chinese real estate, at least in some cities, some big cities like Shenzhen. But in 2021, I don't think it's a good risk-adjusted investment. And if you're living in China and just using it as a home, it also doesn't make sense because renting in China is so cheap compared to buying. How can I help you? In 2 ways. First of all, are you an expat, a high net wealth individual, or just somebody who lives in a part of the world where it's difficult to get access to quality investment solutions? In which case, go onto my website on adamfayed.com and find out more. If you don't fit into any of those categories, then in which case there's a range of free material on my website, on this YouTube channel, and indeed on my Quora, where I get over 200 or have received over 231 million views in the last few years. And finally, if you want to actually read my thoughts in more detail, go onto Amazon and find my book on there.